During a
Oh, did you try one of these? Because these are very good.
Really good.
Yeah, those are very good.
It's really good. Did you ever watch Marathon?
No, it has to do with an airplane. I don't want
Oh,
to
it's
like-
good. It's very good.
Too much with an
Did you
airplane.
see The Vault?
The what?
The Vault. Did you ever see Money Heist?
Yeah,
Okay, well, Money Heist.
that was too long.
Money Heist
They
was,
just slept.
you know,
That was
getting
also a
into the
vault.
Bank of Spain. Well, The Vault is also getting into the Bank of Spain, but a totally different movie. It's very
I
good.
got tired of it after that.
Hello,
Very
Abe.
good. The guy who was his father, and I use that guy, is in one called Hit and Run.
Yeah, you told me about that
Yeah,
yesterday,
we're gonna watch
Susie.
that tonight.
Okay. What else is there?
And Mario, finally, she kind of great and.
You ever watched Virgin River, right?
Which?
Virgin
It's
River.
not for you.
We watched them?
It's kind of a love story, but it's very good. Oh, did you ever see Secreto Bien Guardado?
Oh.
Okay, it's really good.
Are you
There's
going
a
to
Jewish
dinner?
theme to it, but I won't tell you.
Secreto?
Secreto, it's Spanish. Secreto Bien Guardado.
I don't really like these Spanish, the ones that we saw with the dressmaker, with that.
Are you on the?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
You can't do
It's
it.
on Zoom.
You've been up for a while.
You did, I'm so excited, I'm so excited. So I just want to tell you what Mario gave me, which I'm so thrilled about, I'm so happy. that-
Hi, Bernie.
Hello there. How are you?
This would be very good with the people. It's very much.
And I usually get-
Okay.
Hello, Chaim.
Hello, Irony.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay. I don't know.
Okay. Tonight, we're again in volume 7, Yordea, Hilchos Nida, and we're going to start learning Hilchos Tvila. We've done a lot of the preparatory steps to Tefillah, and now this is a long chapter. I'm not sure we're going to finish it tonight. Probably do it in two weeks. Of course, next week is Rosh Hashanah, so we'll probably finish it 2 weeks from now. In the 3 previous years, we studied the halachos relating to preparation for tefillah, which we discussed the laws of chatzitza, and we discussed the laws of chafifa, getting rid of the chatzitzos through bathing. And in this year, we'll discuss the halachos related to the tefillah itself, including the timing of it and the process of it. So we already mentioned in previous year that tefillah is a critical part of the purification, even after a woman ceases to menstruate and successfully completes the Shiva Nakim, 7 days over which she has verified that the bleeding has ceased. Her return to a state of tahara can be executed only by immersion in a valid mikveh. The Gemara in Shabbos presents the following halachic derivation for the obligation to immerse in the mikveh. Says Masechta Shabbos, Ma tamad loimer v'hadava benidasa tehei ad shetavo b'may. A woman remains in a state of nidus until she actually goes through the process of tefillah. And the Shulchan Aruch deals with this. Some of the laws and requirements of the mikveh itself were already explored briefly in the shir titled "The Laws of Chatzitza." For our purposes here, we will suffice by stressing that a home bath or even larger collections of water, such as public swimming pools or bathhouses, are invalid for immersion. The unquestioned standard venue for ritual immersion is a properly constructed and supervised mikveh. As previously, one who has no access to a local mikveh may perhaps immerse in a spring, lake, or ocean in consultation with a halachic authority. So the Shulchan Aruch says, Ein anida v'azava v'yoledes. Anida, a zava is a woman who's had 3 days of zivus bleeding and then has to count zayin nikiyim. V'hayoldos, a woman who's given birth. Now, a woman who gives birth depends on whether they were giving birth to a male or a female. In Torah, a woman who gave birth had tumah for 7 days, and then the tahara bleeding, where she was tahar, even though she bled, was 33 days. We don't really, and then they went to the mikvah on the 41st day. For a female, it was 14 plus 66. And then when they went to the mikvah, they had to do it with tefillah. And they're saying that Shulchan Aruch is saying neither Anida nor a Zava nor a Yoledes is ola from their tumah without tefillah. Shafil afar kamar shanim. Chayiv koreis habu alachas mehan. If none of these women ever had gone to the mikvah, and someone had relations with this woman who is still in her state of nidus, there would be koreis. It's not a matter of a certain amount of time goes by and then there's no more tumah. It's got to be elam kain tovlu karoi b'mokam aroi. Now we're going to see that whether the husband is present in the city, available to his wife, that is going to affect whether or not the woman has to go to the mikveh right away. When a woman's husband is present and not away for an extended period, there is a mitzvah for her to immerse as soon as she is eligible to do so, and not to delay the immersion. This is known as Tvila Bismana Mitzvah, and the Talmud Yerushalmi brings it. V'atanina, aboy min adera, men that are traveling salesmen, and then they come home after being on the road. Nishayim lahem b'cheskas tahara. We assume that when they come back, that the women have gone to the mikveh, because they would have known that their husband, they have to go to the mikveh bisman. Amrav Chanina zosu meres she'asu lishos k'tumasa. A woman cannot stay in her state of impurity longer than she should. That means the moment, according to the Yerushalmi. Is there somebody at the door? No. This is coming. People coming
I
on.
don't know the difference.
Yeah, no, that's people coming on. We'll hear it from the door. So when a woman's husband is away, she might feel that there's no reason to go through all the burdensome preparations of purification, the bathing, the chafifa, all that. However, Rav Chanina holds that it's still a mitzvah to immerse at the proper time, as her husband might return home suddenly. And thus she should not remain impure unnecessarily. The Beis Yosef and his commentary on the Tur comments that in his opinion, the halacha is not in accordance with this opinion of Rabbi Chanina, as women do not usually immerse if their husbands are not home. He qualifies this by saying that it is still proper to immerse on time if one's husband is home, and he's done the statement of the Gemara in Eruvin that Yehoshua was punished for preventing the Jewish people from potentially having children, even for one night. Those of us who learn Shmuel remember that Yehoshua was taken, who learns Navi, he was taken for task for that. So the Beis Yosef quotes that event in Sefer Yoshua. Vani Oimer, says the Beis Yosef. Elavachi sugin da alma. That which was quoted by the Yerushalmi, that women go to the mikveh even though their husbands are not home, he says that's not how we accept the halacha. We actually follow the opinion that doing the tefillah right away is not a specific mitzvah. The Beis Yosef notes that women don't go to the mikveh if their husband's not home. But if the husband is in the city, mitzvah litfol bismana. Shari matzina b'Yoshua shenenash al shabita l'sishrom v'pirv'yavir laylachas, because it says in Yoshua lan ba'emek al balayla zeh, that it was right before one of the battles. And the Meforshim there say was because he was, and a malach appears to him, and it's almost as if he's threatening Yeshua's life. The Meforshim asked, well, what did Yeshua do? So there's different pshatim. One, they didn't learn enough. They were vatal Torah, but the basic pshat is that they didn't allow them to go to the mikvah or them to have relations. So you see, it's not a good thing, and therefore, if the husband's around, Tefillah Bismana is something that should be done. And the Shulchan Aruch records the halacha that there is a mitzvah to immerse on time, at least in cases where the husband is at home. In Baila Be'ir, says the Shulchan Aruch Yordei Kuf Tzadik Zayin, mitzvah lidbol bismana. It's a mitzvah to be toivel at the right time. Shaloli batal mepriyavi afidu laylachas. That they shouldn't be being mevatel pru'urvu even for one night. The poskim point out that even if her immersion will certainly not lead to procreation per se, as in the case of a woman, for example, who's already pregnant. Now, how did she become a nida? Maybe she had a stain. So she got a stain, had to do zayin nikiyim, go to the mikveh. Well, even though that relation with her husband is not going to lead to children, it's mitzvah's ona. Nonetheless, the mitzvah to immerse still applies, as explained by Rav Mordechai on the Darchei Tahara. Mitzvah gam kein shetitvol bizmana, afal pi she'eina l'tzarich priyavivia. Even if it's not going to lead to pru'urvu. Kagod, she muberes, or maybe she's zakena, she's postmenopausal. Still the same din applies. O she'eni chol la'aros mesibas acher, she can't get pregnant for other reasons. Kidei shetiskayem mitzvah's ona. We are required by our ksuba to provide relations to our spouse. So just through mitzvah's ona, sexual relations alone, that don't necessarily lead to pru'urvu, is one of the chiyuvim that we have. By the way, just the footnote number 3 on the other page, that during the siege of Yericho, an angel confronted Yoshua with the criticism that it prevented the people from their study of Torah in the battle camp. As a response, Yoshua threw himself into deep contemplation of the Torah over the course of the night. However, in so doing, he extended the time of the siege and prevented couples from cohabitation and procreation. So it's because they were learning in depth, that's what led to the Bitul Prior Urvu. So we mentioned, back to on 309, we mentioned above that the Moirem Rishon in dispute whether Tefillah Bisman is mitzvah in the case where the husband is away. The Beit Yosef ruled that the Tefillah Bisman is not required if the husband's away. However, contemporary poskim still dispute the ideal course of action in such a case. Rav Ovadia Yosef writes that a woman need not immerse in such a case if she prefers not to, and cites some opinions who hold that she should specifically not immerse until her husband returns. In the Taras Habayis, Avlemain Baila Be'ir, if her husband is not in the city, Ein Tzurich Litbol. This sakana is a mystical danger. That it was explained in the Shvut Yaakov that some form of impure spirit may be attracted to her if she immerses without her husband being in town. This concern has its roots in the Zohar and is mentioned by other Achronim, including the Shevet HaLevi. So for her to go to the mikveh when the husband is not in town is not a good thing according to these Meforshim. On the other hand, some poskim such as Rav Yoshev Noel in Sefer Ish V'Isha write that a woman should try to immerse even if her husband is not at home, as there's usually a chance that perhaps he will return earlier than expected. So he says a woman should not put off the immersion, and even if the husband's not home, she should go and immerse. She should go to the mikveh the moment that mipidin she's allowed to go to the mikveh. Because there's always the possibility that the man could come home suddenly. The case of maybe she won't find an open mikveh at that time. So the Shevet HaLevi, Rav Vosner writes that if she is entirely certain that no chance exists of his returning earlier, then she should not immerse before he returns. This is relevant in the case where the husband, for example, is in China, and she speaks to him on the phone or by other means right before the time of immersion. Well, if he's in China, there's no possibility he's going to get home, so that would not meet the criteria of the Ish V'Isha who said, well, since he can always pop in, maybe she should go to mikvah. According to Rav Wosner, she should not. It's a sakana for her to be toivel if her husband is not there. Another category of cases where no mitzvah exists to immerse on time is on days where she's forbidden to be together with her husband, such as Yom Kippur, such as Tisha B'Av, or where she is sitting Shiva. On those days, there's a prohibition of engaging relations. The halacha rules that one may not immerse, right? Ainli isha litvo b'leil Tisha B'Av b'leil Yom Kippur. Even if it comes out on the right time, that this is her time to go to the mikveh, if it happens to be the night of Tisha B'Av or the night of Yom Kippur, she doesn't go to the mikveh. You're not allowed to have relations. Aval b'shart somos of Yomim Tovi mutter. All other fasts and any other yontif, it's mutter to go to the mikveh that night if that's her night that is the right time. Or imayisha obayla avelim betoch shiva yomim leptira. If the woman or the husband are avelim, asurim betashmish. So they're not allowed to have sexual relations, but mutar b'shar krevis kagon chutz michibu v'nishik. They can be close. They can't hug and kiss. Just before we continue, there's just a footnote on the previous halacha about the sakana, that if the husband's not home and we know he's not going to come home, Rav Wosner advised for her not to go to the mikveh. So the Shvut Yaakov suggests that in such a case, if the woman does wish to immerse while her husband is not home and is concerned with this impure spirit, she may immerse, but if she sticks a knife under one's pillow or places a baby in one's bed, that avoids the sakana. These suggestions are quoted by many later achronim as well, including Rav Wosner and Rav Yosef, Rav Ovadia Yosef. Okay. So we said, Im ha'isha obayla aveli b'toch shiva yomim asur mitashmish mutar b'shar krivus. They can have closeness, but they can't hug and kiss. Lachein isha avela lo titvo b'toch shivas yemei avela. A woman who's an avela should not go to the mikveh during the shiva, 7 days. Ki asura hi berchitza. Part of the avelis is she's not allowed to bathe, and asur lo l'shamesh, and she can't have relations. Aval im baila avel, if the husband is an avel, v'hi eina avela yechola litbol b'toch shiva yemei evlo. If she can go to the mikveh while the husband is observing the 7 days of avelas. She can also make a brach on that vila. Kivan shenem asurim b'shar krivus, they can engage in other acts of closeness, im ein nida, as long as she's not a nida. So that's why there would be a reason for her to go. Ach lo titbol az bilal Shabbos. She shouldn't go on Friday, because intimate relations are forbidden during that Shiva period. The impetus for immersion is not quite as great, since immersion on Shabbos evening is always halachically complicated, and it entails relying upon special leniencies. In this case, one should not immerse on Shabbos at all. So that's an important din during Avelis, where she's normally allowed to go to the mikveh if she's not an Avel, only the husband is an Avel, but she shouldn't do it Friday night. A final case where it's permitted to delay the tefillah is where some important consideration exists that motivate both the husband and wife to desire the delay. Although in general the tefillah should not be delayed, Rav Shlomo Levi explains that it's permitted. He says that it's better not to push off the day of tefillah. It should be right at the end of the Zainikim. Im zot, anu poskim halacha k'Rabbeinu Tam, Shetfila b'zman ain't a mitzvah. In the debate of the Rishonim that we mentioned, whether tefillah b'zman is a mitzvah or not, we pass on Rabbeinu Tam, and it's not. Therefore, lachen ein zuchova gemura. It's not a chiyuv that she has to go. Ela hanaga nechona. It's the proper custom. Uv'mikra tzarach yishmokem lishkol is tchias tefillah. So there might be reasons where the husbands don't want to push it. Well, they want to push it off. Why? There shouldn't be any pressure. It should be done with happiness. Feeling of pressure. And there might be certain cases. Let's say the couple together decide it's better to push her off the tefillah. You can do it. It shouldn't be just stam a reason. It should be a serious reason. It should only be done occasionally. Because they want the tefillah to be done in a state of harmony and peace without pressure. Now, the tefillah normally takes place at night. There is a concept of srach bita, which we're going to learn about tonight, and how what that's all about. We have learned previously that a nida must keep the 7 days known as shiva nikiyim prior to immersing in the mikveh, right? During the 7 days, she has to do a bedika every day, sometimes twice a day, to check that there's no bleeding in that 7-day period. She goes through the 7 days, and we learned there were, let's say she only checked on 1 day or 2 days. We went through all the various exceptions to the Zayin Nikiyim, but let's say she successfully goes through the Zayin Nikiyim. At the end of the Zayin Nikiyim is when she has to go to the mikvah. This means that the earliest possible time when she would be eligible to immerse is the night following the end of those 7 days. Now, the Gemara in Pesachim states that on a Torah level, where a nida may immerse after just 7 days from the onset of her period, she immerses on the 8th night. Remember, in a Torah, let's say during the remember there's a cycle, 7 days of nidus, followed by 11 days of zivus. So let's say in the 7 days of nidus, she bled all 7 days. But she stops bleeding, let's say 3 hours before the night of the 8th, she stops bleeding. So she's no longer a nida minat Torah. You don't need zayin nikiyim minat. As long as her ma'ayan closes, as long as she stops bleeding, right? As long as she stops bleeding, she's only going to be a nida for 7 days. And on the night of the 8th, she goes to the mikveh. Now, we've already established that M'Rabanan, we don't accept that. Because we don't know, is she in her days of nidus or days of zivus? She could be a zava gedola, where 3 days of bleeding during a zivus period renders her a zava. So all of our women are treated as suffix zavas. How does a zava get pure? She has to count zayin nikiyim, 7 clean days. It's not in this 7 days and then go to the mikveh business. She needs 7 clean days. And we see from the Torah law that she goes immediately the night of the 8th, which is the source of the halacha that you have to do tefillah at night. All tefillos. So, for example, somebody touches a nevela, somebody touches a sheretz, somebody touched a dead body, and on the 3rd and 7th day, they would be sprinkled with paraduma, ashes. But then they go to the mikveh, but you can go to the mikveh in the daytime. Then you need hair of shemesh. Then you need the sun to go down, and you're tohor. Same thing. If you touched a nevela or sheretz, you're tameh for 1 day. You can go to the mikveh at 10 o'clock in the morning. You're still tameh. You're a tvul yom. You've gone to the mikveh. So, for example, you can eat meiser. You can't eat trum or kodshim if you're a Kohen or a Levi. That night, you have hair of shemesh. The sun sets, and you're tohor. So that's what the Gemara means that all people who need tefillah get their tefillah in the daytime. Chutz, nida v'yoledes tefillah b'layla. A nida and a woman coming out of childbirth, they go to the mikveh at night. Ditanya, yachol te'tevelas mibod yom. I might think that a nida woman could be told to leave in the daytime. Talmud Lomar shivas yomim tiyeh b'nidasa. She has to be in her state of nidus 7 days. Tehei nidasa kol shiva. The yod and therefore she can only go to the mikveh the night of the 8th, after 7 complete days. The yoldas is kishlinid and a yoledas is compared to a need. So Chazal instituted a rabbinic obligation to wait to immerse until the bleeding stops and then count Shiva Nikiyim. If so, the tefillah will not be considered bismana on a Torah level. It's going to be way after zmana according to the Torah level. The Gemara Nida reports that Rav and Rav Yochanan dispute whether the halach of immersing at night also applies when the immersion is delayed. So again, Minat Torah, we know that our ladies immerse much later than when they should have immersed. So do they have to go to the mikveh at night? Maybe they could go in the day since it's delayed. The Gemara concludes that although Rav originally allowed a woman to immerse during the day, when it's no longer the 7th day of purification on a Torah level, like be the 8th day, Rav retracted, ultimately agrees that tefillah must always be at night. And let's see the dialogue in the Gemara. Rav nida bizmana, ena tovelas ela b'layla. That's if she is immersing in the right time. Shelo bizmana, says Rav, tovelas maybe yom ve'em layla. She could do it at night, but she could also do it in the day, meaning the next day, day 8. Rabbi Yochanan Amar bein bizmana bein shelo bizmana, whether it's the right time, whether it's not the right time, it's delayed, it's still ena tovelas b'layla mishum srach bita. Because it's a danger, her daughter, who sees her going in the mikveh in the daytime, the daughter's not going to understand that this woman, she's going to the mikveh in the daytime of her 8th day. The daughter's going to think that her woman is going to the mikveh in the daytime on her 7th day. And Minat Torah, that's not permitted. You have to do Zayin Nikim, and then only after Zayin Nikim go to the mikveh. So the Srach Bita is the concern that the daughter's going to learn improperly from the mother. Therefore, we never let the mother go in the daytime. And therefore, Rav also changed his mind. Whether the woman is going to the mikveh at the proper time or not, meaning she delayed. Shalom Bismana means she delayed beyond the proper time. That tefillah should not be in the daytime. Mishum srach bita. And Rashi explains srach bita shenoheges achrelet vol biyom. The daughter is going to learn inappropriately that, it's okay to go to the mikveh in the daytime. She doesn't realize that this woman was going to the mikveh on the 8th day where it was permitted according to Rav, because it's not the proper time. And she will go to the mikveh in the daytime even when she's supposed to go. Like when she counted Zayin Nikiyim, she'll go on the last 7th day in the daytime, and that will lead to kores. Because the daughter doesn't understand that this woman who toiled in the daytime toiled on the 8th day, where there's no kores anymore. The Gemara explains that even on a rabbinic level, both Rav and Rav Yochanan agree in the conclusion of the Gemara we just learned that a woman must immerse at night because of srach bita, meaning that if we allow Anita to immerse on the 8th day, her daughter may mistakenly think that it's generally permitted to immerse during the day, even during the last day of the Shiva Nikiyim, where we know that that's not correct. Rishonim discussed whether it would be permitted for Anita to immerse on the 8th day, but return home only following nightfall, so that nobody, including the daughter, would see that she immersed during the day. I mean, let's say she goes to the bathhouse, the mikveh, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it's still daytime, but she stays there for 2 or 3 hours and comes home at night. So the daughter doesn't really see her doing it in the daytime. According to Rabbeinu Tam, it's permitted. According to Rashbam, the way the Mordechai learned him, it's forbidden. This is Hilchos Mikvos of the Mordechai. The Rashbam The Rashbam required the women to go to the mikveh only after nightfall. The Rabbeinu Tam lo haya matzrich. Rabbeinu Tam allowed them to go in the daytime. He demanded, at least, even if she's going to do it in the daytime, on the eighth day, we're talking about eighth day tefillah, she should only come home at night. So the Rosh, right? The Rosh is later than Rabbeinu Tam, right? Rashi lived in the year 1000. Rabbeinu Tam is Rashi's grandson. Let's say in the year 1100. Rabbeinu Tam is one of the Balei Tosfos. The Mordechai is also around that time, around the time of the Tosfos. The Rosh lived in Toledo in the mid of 1200s. Okay, so he's later. And of course, the Rashba was in Barcelona about 100 years later. So the Rosh, right, whose son is the Tur. So the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch, in fact, established the halacha based on a vote between the Rif, who was also almost the same time as Rashi, 1000, he lived in North Africa, the Rif, the Rambam, and the Rosh. He would do a vote. If it was 2 against 1, Shulchan Aruch would paskin, let's say the Rif and the Rosh held one way, the Rambam held another way, the Shulchan Aruch would follow the 2 against 1. So you see, the Rosh is taking for Rabbeinu Tam, an earlier Rishon, and paskening. The Rosh cites the dispute, but he explains that the Rashbam holds that as long as the tefillah itself occurs following nightfall, a woman may leave her house even before it gets dark. So they're playing semantics here. They're saying she could leave to the mikveh during the daytime, but she still has to go to the mikveh physically at night. It seems like Rabbeinu Tam was saying that not only could she go to the mikveh in the daytime, she could be toivel in the daytime. She just had to make sure to come home at night. Says the Rashbam Machmir, Shlotid V'lat Shetechshach, right? It's a chumrah as compared to Rabbeinu Tam, who seemed to lie to do it, go to the mikveh even in the daytime. We're talking about on the 8th day. Near nightfall, the Tovel of Esav was like a lemechel shlasrach bita. So how did the Shulchan Aruch, when he passed the halacha, how did he sort out all of this conflict? Shulchan Aruch rules in accordance with the middle opinion, that the tefillah must be at night, so it's like the Rashbam, but a woman may leave her house earlier than that. An exception to the rules made for a kala, who may immerse lechatchila during the day. Asur litvol b'yom shvi. So first of all, it's asur to ever go to the mikvah on the 7th day. Afilu mimantenes melitvol ad yom shmini ochi. Now, let's say she's beyond the Zayin Nikiyim. She's now on the 8th day or the 9th day. Eina yechol litvol b'yom mishum srach bita. They made this gzeira that a woman should not be toivel in the daytime because the daughter might learn inappropriately. Right? Dibu kabas v'korvos alasos k'masaim shetitvol b'yom kamo v'lo tafkin she'im alachar shiva tovel v'lo b'shviatzmo. The daughter's not realizing that this woman is on the 8th or 9th or 10th day. It's clearly permitted. I mean, Yikra Din, it's just we don't want the daughter seeing that because she'll think, oh, if my mother went to the mikveh in the daytime, I can go to the mikveh in the daytime even on the 7th day. And that we know she's going to be a nida midoraisa. And the tefillah is not going to help. So there's going to be kores if she has relations with her husbands that way. And here's where the Ramah steps in to say hakalois hatoivlois koidem achupa a kala who goes to the mikveh before the chuppah, yecholas litvol b'yom. She can go in the daytime. The halaboin eitz lachasan ala laila. They don't bring her to the groom until night. Aval achra chuppah dina kishar noshim. After the chuppah, then she has to go to the mikveh only at nighttime. Two influential Ashkenazi achronim, the Bach, who's a commentator on the Tur, and the Shach, who's the main commentator on Yoreh De'ah, the Shulchan Aruch, side with the more machmir ruling of the Mordechai, in opposition to the stance of the Shulchan Aruch. They rule that a woman may not leave home to go to the mikveh until nightfall, unless she also performs the preparation for immersion on the mikveh premises. So their exception to the rule was she could usually she should only leave at night to the mikveh. The exception to the rule was she could already head to the Beis HaMikveh in the daytime if they know she's going to spend hours there in all the preparations. Some mikvahs have beautiful spas, and they go there and they bathe for hours, whatever. And all the preparations, the chafifa, is all done. They don't do it at home and go to the mikveh. They do it there. Then they permitted it, that she could already start in the daytime. Because we learned that chafifa in some cases can start already in the daytime. Kosav Abach, generally, the Bach said, we don't allow women to go to the mikveh during the daytime. Hainu, when? Kisha isha roichatzas v'choifefes bevesa. If she's going to do her chafifa and washings and everything at home, and then holeches l'makom tvila, then she should not go to the makom tvila, only at night. Aval kishiyesh merchatz u'beis hatfila b'makom echad. There's a spa, a bathhouse in the Beis HaTfilah. V'ha'isha holeches mibod yom. The woman is going to go in the daytime, l'merchatz shah or shtaim kodem chashecha, an hour or two before night. Ubal lebeisa achar chashecha, and she comes home after night. Aval pisha merchatz u'beis hatfilah kor v'somach lebeisa. Even though these are close to her house. Ein kan mishum srach pita. We don't have to worry about the daughter. The bas yodat she shah berchitza v'chafifa merchatz. The daughter knows she's not going to the mikveh in the daytime, that what she's doing in the daytime there is bathing, washing, shampooing, doing the chafifa. She knows that her mother is only going to the mikveh once nightfall. Ad kan lashono. That was the lashon of the Bach that the Shach brings. So if the Shach brings it, it usually means he holds by it. Now, what if a woman doesn't have any daughters? Or to a woman whose daughter is away from home or otherwise unaware of her mother's comings and goings? So the Shach insists that the halacha applies even to such a woman, due to the principle of lo plug. This is one of the examples where they made no distinction. This is halacha for every woman. She has a daughter, she doesn't have a daughter. We don't want to, otherwise it's going to lead to problems. According to which Chazal instituted general sweeping decrees based on circumstances appropriate for the masses, without making exceptions for outlying individuals. It's forbidden for all women to immerse during the day. That's what the Shach says. It's an important Shach. So Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, one of the contemporary poskim, not alive anymore, but he was alive in the last 20, 30 years, writes that one should immerse after nightfall on the night concluding the seventh day. That's Meikaran did. He adds that in case of need, it may be permitted to immerse after sunset, meaning after Shkia, but before Tzeis, before Tzeis HaKochavim, before nightfall. So we know that there's usually about 72 minutes, at least in Los Angeles, between Shkia and Tzeis. And that's the period of time of Bein HaShmoshes. Some places it's less. Some places are matir to do certain things. They hold that there's sort of a shorter period. But in general, And I'm sure we will go into depth about the machlokas between the very opinions regarding this length of time between Shkia and Tzeis. But what Rav Mordechai Eliyahu is saying, that normally you should go to the mikveh after Tzeis, Laila itself. But Shkia, sunset, we'll see in great need, it could be done as well. Zmanat Tefillah Tov Yoter B'sof Hayom Hashvi L'Shivas Anakim. The best time of the mikveh is going to be the end of the seventh, after the night after the 7 days. After she does her washing. She looks herself, she touches herself. She cleans herself of all the chatzitzos. Tovelas balayla achrei tzeisa koichavim. Mikra adin, the tefillah should occur after tzeisa koichavim. Shehu b'derech klal 20 dakos achrei hashkia. Now that may be wherever Rav Mordechai Eliyahu was, 20 minutes after shkia. Here it's later. That's why, let's say, if it's usually an hour. Well, candle lighting is about 18 minutes prior to Shkia. So it's 18 plus 20, 38. It's usually longer. It's usually an hour in Los Angeles. So it had to do with, I guess, why he's saying 20 minutes after Shkia. I think in general it's usually longer. She's certainly not allowed to go to the mikvah on the 7th day. We're concerned if she went to the mikveh earlier on the 7th day, she might see blood again. And then the tefillah wasn't working. So she's got to wait the end of the 7th day and make sure that there's no bleeding. Says Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, in an emergency, just after sunset, she should only come home until after Tzeis. She should ask a posek before she relies on that leniency. What about tefillah on Friday night? The Achronim discussed the proper method of immersion on Friday night. How may one immerse in hot water without running afoul of restrictions on bathing in hot water on Shabbos? Most Ashkenazi poskim follow the approach articulated Rav Vosner in the Shevet HaLevi, that despite the general prohibition of using hot water heated on Shabbos, even if it was heated permissibly, immersion in the mikveh in hot water is permitted even on Shabbos. By the way, let me just read the footnote 9. The calculation of nightfall, which is tzeis, as well as sunset, which is shkia, or dawn, which is alos hashachar, and sunrise, which is nates, as I stated, are all subject to much halachic discussion and debate. While some adopt a longer interval between sunset and nightfall, right, between shkia and tzeis, Rav Eliyahu's number of 20 minutes is a dominant position in Eretz Yisrael, aside from the position of Rabbeinu Tam, which is 72 minutes. However, even according to this conceptual position, many poskim rule that the calculation of nightfall, meaning tzeis, vis-a-vis sunset, depends on the latitude and altitude. Accordingly, the interval between sunset and nightfall is longer when one is further from the equator. For this reason, many argue that nightfall, tzeis, in North America and Europe is later, between 30 and 50 minutes after sunset. I want to read the other footnote 10, where we said that a woman is never allowed to go to the mikvah on the 7th day. And this is the original reason given for immersing on the night after the 7th day. Anita may not immerse according to Torah law until the nighttime. But a zava may immerse on the 7th day according to Torah. Chazal decreed that she should not do so because of concern that she may bleed on the seventh day after immersing. The decree of Srach Bita mentioned above applies primarily to immersing on the eighth day, like we said, because the daughter sees her going on the eighth day. She doesn't know it's the eighth day. She thinks it's the seventh day. That's a different gezerah. So let's read this Shevet HaLevi. Ba'achronim donu b'yisur v'chitza b'chamin. The Achronim deal with bathing on Shabbos in hot water. The minig in our mikvahs is the water is heated. Ishari mekradin. So is that permitted on Shabbos? Shekas rabbi Achronim. Shegdoyle adoris shotku al zeh. Gedolim in the previous generations were quiet. They did not object to women going to the mikvah, even in hot water. And the onam imye asru hayom. If poskim today would stand up and aser, yimnu nashim rabbois mitfila, many women would not go to the mikvah if they know they have to go to the mikvah in cold water. They relied on the korban nesal shegzeres merchatzos aisarak al merchatz v'lo mikvah tfilas mitzvah. When they decreed a law against bathhouses, that's in the Gemara, on hot water on Shabbos, that was only in a bathhouse, not to a mikvah. See the Gemara in Shabbos 40a, that Chazal forbade using hot water in the bathhouse on Shabbos, even where the water was heated up beforehand, right, which technically is permissible, due to the concern that attendants would heat the water on Shabbos itself. According to Korban Nesanel, this decree was never intended to apply to a mikvah. Now, Noida Yehuda Kosav, right? The Noida of Yehuda was the great posek in Prague who lived, 1790, 1810, something like that, in Prague. The Gamhu Eina Moche, he did not object to the women going to hot water, even though he wasn't that happy, because he didn't find the Korban Nesanel that correct. But mutav shius shoygigin. There's a concept. If they're doing something improper, better that they should be a shogig and not know than be amazed. I want to read the footnote. In limited cases in which public behavior does not accord with the strict letter of the law, the Gemara mentions mutav sheyeh shogig v'ayu mezid. Better that the people not be told, this is prohibited, because right now whatever they're doing b'shogeg. Better for them to be mistaken, for them to be wanton sinners. According to this argument, when the authorities understand that their instructions will not be heeded. For example, let's say they announce you cannot bathe in a hot water mikvah. You can only go to cold water. And if the chachamim know that no one's going to listen to that, it's better for the people to be left violating the halacha unknowingly than to be violating it knowingly by telling them, it's prohibited to do this. Better not to tell them that. However, the Gemara does not sanction simply turning a blind eye when people are violating explicit Torah law. The Noda applies this principle to the case at hand of using hot water heated up before Shabbos, which is only a rabbinic prohibition, indicating that in principle he disapproves of it. His position is more stringent than that of the other explanations advanced for leniency, cited by Rav Wosner. I'm reading in the Shevet HaLevi, Tam Lahatir. Mishum diyarda chul shel weakness has come down to the world. Ubiprat b'mosacharf, and in winter primarily. Hakol choylin eitzel, everybody gets sick when it becomes cold. The rubadama enem echolim lidvo b'tzonim, and most of the world cannot bathe in cold water. V'shari b'chamim. Therefore, he says it's permitted to go in hot water. Many Sephardic poskim, including Rav Ovadia Yosef, hold that only lukewarm water should be used on Shabbos, but not hot water. Therefore, it's preferable, in their opinion, to immerse during Bein HaShmoshes, before nightfall, on Shabbos, Erev, Friday night, when there's a degree of leniency with respect to certain prohibitions of Shabbos, and using hot water can be permitted. Isha shechal leil tfilosa belil Shabbos. If the water of the mikveh is hot or lukewarm, better that she should be toivel ben hashmoshes rather than after tzeis. Because when ben hashmoshes, it's safek yom, safek laila. Maybe it's not Shabbos. If they can't do that, she says if she's going to go to the mikveh after tzeis, better for her to go in lukewarm water. And lo tidchat tfilah, shouldn't put off the tefillah. The main shem el mikveh shel mayim chamim mamish. If there's only hot water, afal pichein rishayis lidbol b'di'evet. He says b'di'evet, meaning not l'chatchila, but b'di'evet. If there's no other choice, she can go in such a mikveh as well. Now, is there any time where it might be permitted for her to go to the mikveh on the 8th day? Not the night of the 7th, but the daytime of the 8th. We've learned up until now that no. We've said that if at most we said that she should head to the mikveh maybe an hour or two while it's still daytime before night of the 8th, and she's got to come home on the 9th. On the night after she went to the mikveh. So what happens if it's extremely difficult to immerse at night? Is there any case in which it would be permitted to postpone her immersion, not go the night of the 7th, perform it on the following day, despite this decree of Srach Bita? Remember we said, well, the daughters are going to see, and they're going to think that it's permitted to go on the 7th day in the daytime. So the Gemara Nida addresses this question, presents a number of cases in which Chazal were lenient. Iskin Ravidi Barnash Lemitvil Biyoma the Tamne Mishum Aryivusa. He permitted the ladies to go to the mikveh in the daytime of the 8th because there were lions roaming at the night. Ravacha Bar Yaakov Bepunya Mishum Ganvi, because there were robbers at night. Rav Yehuda B'Madisa Mishum Tzina, because it was cold at night. Rav B'Machuz Mishum Avuloi. These were gatekeepers that were untrustworthy and would harm the women. So the Gemara concedes that although immersion is normally forbidden during the day, some hazards to nighttime immersion were considered serious enough to permit it. Wild animals, thieves, frigid temperature, and gatekeepers. So, although the simplest understanding is that this is a function of the frigid mikveh waters, the Gemara does not specify explicitly whether this was the intent or whether it was due to the cold air outside, like during the winter season. And the scope of this heter is unclear. Did it become the norm for women in Pumbedisa to immerse on the 8th day? Or was it only a minority of women? Is cold considered a greater hazard than rain, snow, or ice? Obviously, if it's a function of weather, the practical applications would be substantial. And the Bari HaShulchan cites both interpretations. The Or Zarua understands the water to be cold. The Rambam in Yisrei Bia seems to understand the outdoor weather to be cold. In practice, women do not usually receive permission today to immerse during the day simply because it's cold or rainy outside. The main concern is for the temperature of the waters, which is also not commonly a problem today since water is usually heated. However, if extreme inclement weather makes it especially difficult or dangerous to travel to the mikveh specifically at night, that would be included as well. Let's say at night there's black ice and there's, it ices up or something where it doesn't happen in the daytime. That would be something that they would.
Are you going to go over issues of sakana? Like we had several years ago, we had, because of riots, we had a nighttime curfew.
Yeah, so we're going over right here. So first of all, the Gemara said wild animals, thieves. We just analyzed the frigid temperature. What did they mean by gatekeepers? So according to Rashi, these gatekeepers were not trustworthy. Concern existed that they might harm women, much like the thieves. If you already said thieves, why did you have to add these gatekeepers? So other commentaries, such as the Beit Yosef, explain that the concern was that the gates themselves would be closed and the women would be unable to access the mikveh. So the Tur and Shulchan Aruch rule in accordance with the passage and cite 3 out of these 4 conditions. Right? Cold, pachad ganavim, fear of thieves, kiyotzbo, or they're going to close the gates. Remember, the time of they lived in ghettos, and the ghetto wall would be sealed after 6 p.m. You wouldn't be able to, if you went, they would close, you couldn't get back in. So in those situations, they could go already in the daytime on the 8th day. Never on the 7th. The poskim churches, the Darchei Tahara, point out that even when immersion is permitted during the daytime because of the hazards mentioned above, the halacha retains a fundamental resistance to daytime immersion. As such, steps are taken to ensure that the couple conducts itself as though the immersion does not take place until after nightfall. Right? If a woman goes to the mikveh at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the 8th day, she cannot be seen with her husband before nightfall. The main shum of sharut, you go into shari ayir skurim balayla. Let's say the gates are closed at night. Mutter layam liyos biyachad b'dirosam. They can be in the home together, but they should not be there alone. Better for the husband to leave the house until after Tzeis. Even if the tefillah was Friday night. Or let's say it's the 8th, right? The 8th day, and she went Friday afternoon near nightfall. She shouldn't come home until Shetechshach. Or Shabbat, they have to make sure that the husband's not there. So extending the leniency, Rav Ovadia Yosef allows a woman to elect to emerge on the 8th day for any reason, even if there is no particular dire circumstance, so long as she does not disclose to her husband that she has already emerged, just to wait until nightfall. Many Ashkenazi poskim have not accepted this leniency. The Ashkenazi poskim wanted to be some type of onus. So let's see the Taras Abayis, Rav Ovadia. Normally, a woman should not go on the 8th day, unless we said there's some extenuating circumstance. There's thieves, there's cold. Says Rav Ovadia Yosef, if she wants to go on the 8th day, she can. But she has to make sure not to come home until after nightfall. Even if she emerges on the daytime way before nightfall. And therefore, if she pushed off her tefillah until the 8th day, and the husband left the night before, and if the woman waited until nightfall, they won't have time to have relations. He's going to leave after the 8th day. If she waits until nightfall to go to the mikveh, and they made the timing, they're not going to have time. So she can go to the mikveh on the 8th day in the daytime. But she can't come home until after Chashecha. But that maybe that amount of time that she saves will allow them to have relations. Okay. So I'm going to stop here. Is there ever a permission to do tefillah on the 7th day prior to Shkia. And then we'll talk sort of like what Chaim asked about during lockdowns, curfews, riots, things like that. During Corona, we will learn what they actually do during the privacy that's required during Tvila, how they examine for Chatzitzos, what does the mikveh attendant do, what bracha do you make, how many immersions do you make. Mirz Hashem will do that in 2 weeks. The week of Yom Kippur, the night of Erev Yom Kippur will be the next time we learn, God willing. Everybody should have a Ksiva Tova and a Ksiva Tova, and everybody should daven well.
Very funny.